Hello, my friends. It is June 6, 2024. Today, we're going to look at another flashback because this was a big event in what happened in Ukraine. It was the destruction of the Nova Kakhova Dam, and then the Russians blamed Ukraine. It was one of the most frustrating days of the entire war. That's 800 some odd days of war, and this was one of the most frustrating to my mind. So here we go. We're going to watch it, and I'm going to comment periodically on it. Here we are.
Position where I spend all my time just trying. So I've somehow defaulted into a position where I spend all my time just trying to counter Russian lies. And I'll show you what I mean by that, because the evidence is everywhere. And a kind of administration or regime, and I'm going to use the word regime because they talk about the Kiev regime all the time, the kind of regime that's going to put a political prisoner in jail on a trumped-up charge. So I've somehow defaulted into a position where I spend all my time just trying to counter Russian lies. And I'll show you what I mean by that, because the evidence is everywhere. And a kind of administration or regime, and I'm going to use the word regime because they talk about the Kiev regime all the time, the kind of regime that's going to put a political prisoner in jail on a trumped-up charge like they did with Navalny is not trustworthy.
And by the way, we all know what happened to Navalny less than a year later, about what, 10 months, 9 months later, Navalny dies in prison.
Kind of people that react to, that listen to Ministry of Defense statistics or things along those lines and then parrot these. I think I can't make out what's going on with the Duran, but I believe Scott Ritter is actually a true believer in this, and that's what's really scary. And then you get the constant
and I still believe that. I think they are making money and they kind of lean that way, but I think he's a true believer. I think he really does want Russia to prevail and wants Russia to win more than he wants American interests, or he thinks that Russia winning is American interests.
said she said kind of thing going on, where like the Moscow drone attack, well, who did it? Was it Russia? Was it Ukraine? Who was it? And we can't tell. So I'm going to try to explain how I'm thinking through some of these with today's events. So today we're looking at the collapse of the critical dam. It's right by the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and this is what's scary, because I don't believe that Russia will use a nuclear weapon, like a tactical nuclear. They won't launch a nuclear weapon from their territory, because that would show that they did it. But they could very well let a disaster just happen at Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. I pray to God that that does not happen, right? We absolutely don't want that to happen. But the water is going to be getting low, and they're going to have to at least shut the power plant down, and we'll see how that works. But here's the water at the dam that's below the power plant, and it's going to flood into major cities like Kherson and 80 different little villages around that area. And it's absolutely terrible. Now, the Russians, it's pretty clear that the Russians did that, but they're blaming Ukraine for it, and it's absolutely mind-boggling how they can have the audacity to do that, to blame Ukraine for flooding their own territory. If you want to watch a good segment, I'm not going to show you the video here, but go to see Combat Veteran Reacts today on wiping out the entire towns here. What's going on? It is a war crime. That's what it is. If you want to,
and the environmental disasters keep happening. Last Wednesday, not just a couple days, I mean a week ago Wednesday, yeah, a week ago Wednesday I think it was, I was on with Greg Terry, and he was showing with Zhenya some of the environmental just destruction that was just all over, like where there was a river that was, you couldn't throw a stone across it, it's basically dried up. I mean, there's all kinds of issues like that have environmental destruction.
Feel it emotionally. Like, put yourself in the shoes of how Ukrainians are processing it. And I'm not showing this video either. I want you, I'm telling you, after you're done with me, go watch Anna from Ukraine talk about this. You'll feel it emotionally. Okay, and again, at the same time, this is RT. RT is saying this. According to local officials, the key infrastructure was, quote, destroyed as a result of a strike by Ukrainian forces. Like, and they say that with impunity. They say that as if people are going to, like, believe it. But, you know, I, even as I heard myself say that, these guys will say, well, you know, it looks like Ukraine did it. I mean, that's what's going to happen here. So you can't really believe that. Now, at the same time, it looks like a counteroffensive, or at least a beginning kind of forays into a counteroffensive has started, and Russia says that it thwarted a major Ukrainian offensive. Well, you know, they say that, and there is movement on the ground. At the same time,
And over the next few weeks, they would be proven right. That's true. Over the next few weeks, they would be proven right that they would be able to really back up Ukrainian forces, because the Ukrainians really didn't have the all the tools that they needed in order to prosecute a counteroffensive across minefields and all kinds of things.
the Russians are how successful they are, that the large-scale Ukrainian offensive is repelled, and they're talking about the broader war in the Donbass, and they're claiming Ukrainian armed forces have lost more than 250 service members, 16 tanks, 3 infantry vehicles, 21 armored vehicles, said the Ministry of Defense. I mean, I just can't believe it. And neither can Prigozhin. It was calling that claim science fiction. That's amazing. And I'm going to do a whole different video on Prigozhin himself and his fights with the Russian Ministry of Defense and the Chechens and whatever else. So we'll look for that. But yeah, Prigozhin called it science fiction. And we got to understand that this is all happening in context.
So even Prigozhin called Moscow's claim that Ukraine struck the dam science fiction. Like, wrap that around your mind.
In a broader context about what's going on and how Xi's looking at it, but even a broader context. Today is D-Day. It's the anniversary of D-Day. It's June 6th, 79 years ago today. That's what was going on the shores of France, and it's just it's amazing to me how stupid we humans can be. Like, how many years? Google this. Google how many years has humanity not been at war? Has the world ever been at peace? Over the last 3,400 years, humans have been entirely at peace for that's no wars anywhere that we know of. And it could be that some tribe somewhere were still at war, but at 268 years, or just 8% of recorded history, humans have been at peace. See, this is our default position, because humanity is terrible to, I mean, humans are terrible to other humans. That's the reality. And this is one of the reasons that I'm supporting Ukraine, because I see the barbarity being inflicted on Ukraine even now. Now, at the same time, we have Russia's special operation in Ukraine and Sputnik News. Just what happened in Belgorod, the second incursion here. Russia military disperses Ukrainian armed group in Belgorod, says Russian news. And they go on and talk about it. And remember this one over here where they were showing this from the first incursion, this scammy thing made up of what was going on. But what's actually happened is not that they've dispersed a large group, but what's actually happened is that the Foreign Legion, the Russian Legion, or whatever they call themselves, and the anti-Kremlin fighters say that they've actually captured Russian soldiers. Now,
this wasn't a big thing. And by the way, that picture with the vehicle was shown to be like a setup. Like, they created a thing so it looked like that vehicle had crashed, and it wasn't. And there were reasons why you could see that that was the case.
Far from they have been dispersed, they actually have hostages who they're going to turn over to the Ukrainian authorities, because they said, hey, governor, if you're willing to come pick them up, we'll give them back to you or exchange them or whatever. And he wasn't willing to do that, so they're being turned over to the Ukrainian authorities. They took,
by the way, and this was a very small scale operation, but it was something. It wasn't nothing.
Hostages, like Russian soldiers in their custody. So, okay. Now, there was some interesting news, some good news. That is that the Kremlin says that Putin mobilization announcement broadcast on radio stations was a fake. Now, I don't want him to be putting out a mobilization announcement any more than he does, because he's trying to not rattle his people in that way. So what happened was that there was a Kremlin radio address that was supposedly by Vladimir Putin announcing a full-scale mobilization, and Peskov is saying it's not true. This is one of the few times where Peskov is actually telling the truth. So here we go. Peskov's statement came out hours after several radio stations broadcast what was introduced as a statement by the president, in which it was announced that Ukrainian forces, quote, armed to their teeth by NATO and with the support and approval of Washington, invaded the Kursk, Belgorod, and Bryansk regions, and as a result, martial law was being imposed in those areas. And it went on, it continued. Also, today I will sign a decree on a full-scale mobilization because to prevail the dangerous and subtle enemy we need to unite all forces of the Russian Federation. The statement, read by a similar voice to Putin's, said in the broadcast, but it turned out to be a fake. Somebody was trolling Putin with that. So that's what's going on here. And you know, it's hard to sift out what's true from what's false, but I have to side on, and I get a lot of this when, like, comments in the Duran video. People will say, well, you really believe Western media? No, listen, I take Western media with a grain of salt. I know that Western media has a narrative to it, but I'm looking for the facts within the narrative, facts that I can triangulate on, and they actually have some journalistic standards. I can't really believe the Russian Ministry of Defense because they've been proven to be liars, and to believe a proven liar, even if they're telling you the thing that you want, seems to be a fool's errand. So I don't know how it's happened exactly, but somehow I've defaulted into just trying to expose who's telling the truth and who's lying and why in this informational war. And I hope that helps you, because my whole job here, everything that I've been trying to do since day one, was try to give you greater context so that you could understand what's going on in the war in Ukraine. And I hope that this was useful to you. If it was, please give me a like, share this with somebody who needs to see it, subscribe. Thank you for your time, for the coffees, but more than anything else, I want to thank you sincerely from the bottom of my heart for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.
Now this I had this video from Anna from Ukraine pop up. You're not going to be able to click on it here, but I wanted people to see that afterwards, because when you heard her talk about this, you could feel the emotions Ukrainians were feeling. Okay, that's a little trip down memory lane about when the Nova Kakhova Dam was blown out. It turns out it appears from the inside. There was not a missile attack as far as we can detect, and it certainly wasn't from the Ukrainians. And yeah, that's what was going on in that context 1 year ago today. Tell me what you think about that. If you like these, I'll do these periodically, but I'll be more judicious about how often I do these. Maybe when we get to Prigozhin's Freedom March or coup or whatever you call that. All right, thank you for the time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.